What would you sacrifice for your life's work, your time, your comfort, your reputation? What if the price was your honor, your dignity, your very identity as a man? This was the choice faced by Sima Qian, the grand historian of Han Dynasty China. At the crossroads, he rejected a swift, honorable death and chose something far worse, a lifetime of public humiliation and institutional disgrace, or to complete a single book. We admire sacrifice when it looks noble, but the Sima Qian story faces a far more uncomfortable question. When a system leaves you with only two options, how do you calculate the value of your own suffering against the value of your work? Today, we are not just telling the story of a great historian, we are dissecting the most brutal choice, the decision to sacrifice one's honor to preserve one's legacy. This is the story of how one man's personal agony became a nation's immortal memory. Welcome to our channel. We bring you echoes across history. Grab a beer, here we go! Our story unfolds under the reign of one of the most formidable emperors in Chinese history, Emperor Wu. We actually talked about him back in our Zhang Chen episode. This guy was not a man to be trifled with. On one hand, he was a visionary. He massively expanded China's borders, crushed the powerful Xiongnu nomads who had plagued the dynasty for generations, and opened up the Silk Road. He was a titan, a nation builder, recognized outstanding from all the emperors of Chinese history. But titans cast long shadows. This ambition had a price. His endless wars drained the treasury and bled the population dry. And he ruled with an iron fist wrapped in imperiousness. He was the kind of leader who could build an empire and destroy a man with the same detached efficiency. In his later years, Emperor Wu, driven by political motives, forced his once most beloved crown prince into rebellion, ultimately leading to the prince's suicide. His mercurial temperament made serving him like being a bomb disposal expert with shaky hands. And the man tasked with documenting this explosive era was our hero, Sima Qian. His job as court historian wasn't just clerical. In fact, the entire process of collecting, recording, organizing, and writing history has been highly valued across all Chinese dynasties. This is because the transmission of history fundamentally represents a nation's values. Through the documentation and evaluation of specific figures and events, it expresses what is right versus wrong, what should be praised versus condemned, profoundly influencing rulers' governance and the legitimacy of their rule. So, you can compare this position to Supreme Court justice nowadays in a sense. This was especially challenging during the Han Dynasty, when paper wasn't yet widespread and knowledge is still confined to the upper echelons of society. Court historians had to provide comprehensive, objective, and upright accounts of history. Think about it, they were paid by the court, yet expected to objectively record both the merit and the faults of their rulers. It was no easy task, and explained later why. Also, for our hero Sima Qian, it was a sacred duty passed down from his father, Sima Tan. His father had started an audacious project to write the first comprehensive history of China, from the midst of mythology to the present day, a single book to contain the civilization. On his deathbed, Sima Tan made his son swear an oath to complete this colossal undertaking. For Sima Qian, this wasn't just a career, it's a sacred pact between the father and the son, between the living and the dead. 4 years, Sima Qian worked in the Imperial Library, a sanctuary of scrolls and silence, meticulously weaving together the threads of the past. He was a scholar, living in the quiet life of purpose. He was safe, he was respected. until the day General Ling unfortunately got captured. Ling was a hotshot general sent on a high-risk mission deep into enemy territory. He was widely outnumbered, 5,000 infantry against 80,000 nomadic cavalry. It was a David versus Goliath situation, except Goliath had 75,000 friends. Miraculously, Ling fought like a demon, but was ultimately overwhelmed and captured. Back in the capital, Emperor Wu heard the news and went ballistic. For him, a general surrender was the ultimate betrayal. The court, smelling blood in the water, immediately turned on Ling, calling him a coward or a traitor. It was a political feeding frenzy. Sima Qian was there, watching it all. He knew Ling. He knew he was a brave soldier sent on an impossible task, and he couldn't stomach the sight of these courtly virtues tearing a good man's name to shreds. So he did something incredibly brave and incredibly foolish. He spoke. He didn't mount a grand defense. He simply injected a dose of reason into the echo chamber. "Your Majesty," he began. Ling served you faithfully. He fought against incredible odds. Perhaps his surrender wasn't an act of treason, but a strategic choice, hoping to serve you again in the future. Sima Qian had just fact-checked the emperor in public. He had suggested the emperor's rage might be premature. Emperor Wu's fury redirected with the force of a tidal wave. In his mind, defending a traitor made Sima Qian a traitor himself. The logic was simple, brutal, and final. The quiet scholar was dragged from the court, thrown into the infamous silk-worn palace, a grim euphemism for the prison where castration was performed, and sentenced to death. His life work, the promise to his father, the history of his entire world, was about to be extinguished because he had dared to speak a few words of truth to power. In the darkness of his cell, Sima Qian was trapped. His friends abandoned him, terrified of being associated with him. He was a political leper. In Han Dynasty China, if you were a gentleman scholar sentenced to death, you had options. You could pay a massive fine to have your sentence commuted. So he had 3 doors in front of him. Door number 1, pay a colossal fine. Impossible. He had bugs, not gold. Door number 2, suicide. This was the gentleman's exit, a final act of defiance that preserved one's dignity in the face of a complicated world. It was clean. It was expected. Then there was door number 3, a door not to death, but to something far worse in the eyes of his society, the punishment of castration. It's hard for us to understand the sheer totality of this punishment. It wasn't just a physical act. It was a social and a spiritual annihilation considering ancestor worship tradition. It severed you from your ancestors by ending your family line. It made you an object of public scorn, a creature of the shadows, no longer considered a complete man. It was a sentence to a life of perpetual, walking shame. And this was Sima Qian's crossroads. The choice was on the table. He could choose a death that would be lamented for the weak, or he could choose a life that would be ridiculed for the generation. But he thought of the promise. He thought of the thousands of stories yet untold, the heroes yet unsung, the villains yet unjudged. He thought of the half-finished scrolls sitting in his library, waiting for their author to return. And in that moment of ultimate despair, he made a decision that would echo across history. He decided his personal honor was less important than the truth. He decided his body was less important than his book. He decided his life belonged not to himself, but to history, to faith, to the glory of man's spirit. He chose the third door. He chose the knife. He chose to leave. When Sima Qian emerged from that prison, he was a ghost walking in the world of the living. He was assigned a meaningless post as a palace eunuch, a position of ultimate intimacy with power, yet utterly devoid of it. He endured the averted gazes, the whispered insults, the crushing weight of his disgrace every single day. But this agony became his ink, the suffering became his lens. He now saw the world with a clarity that no comfortable, respected historian ever could. He understood the fragility of glory, the cruelty of power, the silent desperation of the condemned. His experience didn't just break him, it forged him into something stronger. Every night, he would return to his work and he would write. He poured his shattered heart, his righteous anger, and his profound empathy onto page. He wrote not just of emperors and generals, but of merchants, assassins, poets, and jesters. He chronicled not just victories and defeats, but the small human moments that truly define an era. He gave a voice to the voiceless, an honor to the dishonored. He labored for 13 more years, 13 years of shame, 13 years of single-minded, indefatigable creation. And then he finished the Shiji, the records of the grand historian, over 500,000 characters, 130 volumes, the story of a people, a culture, a world. It was done. Shiji is China's first comprehensive biographical history, chronicling nearly 3,000 years from the legendary Yellow Emperor to Emperor Wu of Han. It established the biographical format for historical writing, organized into 5 sections: imperial annals, hereditary houses, biographies, tables, and treatises. This structure became the standard template that all subsequent dynastic histories, collectively known as the 24 histories, will follow. Sima Qian's commitment to factual accuracy and his resilience in the face of personal adversity became an enduring model for generations of historians. So, later generations honored him with the title the Grand Historian. In a letter written from his prison, Sima Qian explained his choice. "A man has only one death," he wrote. "It can be as weighty as Mount Tai, or as light as goose feather. It all depends on how it is used." By refusing the easy escape of an honorable death, he made his life's work his final, unassailable argument. He proved that a man's worth is not defined by his body or by the opinions of others, but by the legacy he chooses to build. The emperor could take his manhood, but he could not take his mission. Sima Qian did more than just write history. He redefined the very soul of what it means to be a historian, to be a steward of the truth, no matter the personal cost. He set a standard of courage and integrity that has inspired and shamed writers for 2 millennia. He walked through the deepest valley of human degradation and emerged carrying a mountain of work so vast and so profound that it became the bedrock of a civilization's memory. He sacrificed everything a man could lose, and in return, he gave his country the one thing that can never be taken away, its history. So, what was the ultimate fuel for this monumental work? Was it the selfish duty to preserve the past, or the ultimate act of personal revenge, crafting a legacy that will outlive the emperor who shamed him? Let's debate the historian's true motive in the comments. If you believe these stories of profound sacrifice must be told, subscribe and become an angel investor in our channel's mission. It's a powerful story about the price of a legacy, and one worth sharing with anyone who feels the weight of history.